Welcome to PreVetted Podcast, a blend of tech and leadership. Our goal is to explore the journeys and stories of our guests, revealing valuable insights about engineering and business, and sharing them with our community. Our guest today is Yasin Abbak. He is an entrepreneur with a background in finance, and he launched multiple successful startups and companies, and we're going to talk in more detail about that. So you're welcome to join us. Hello, Yasin. How are you doing today?
Doing very well. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And I'll get to the details of multiple successful startups. There were some that were learning experiences along the way. So hopefully we continue on a more upward trajectory of everything I do from now on, but have some more stories too.
I was reading about all the startups that you started and exited, and I have to say I admire your trajectory and everything that you achieved.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
Yeah, it's it looks easy on the on the CV, but then it's sweat and pain and commitment and sheer commitment, right?
The CV is the CV is the interesting part. You just take the highlights and pop it in. Yeah,
Right.
the worst part of it is just living through it to get that one bullet point highlight on the CV.
Yes. It looks easy from the outside, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had it easy. Let's
Right.
hope for easiness moving forward.
Yes, but I'm an entrepreneur as well. I founded multiple companies. Maybe not as successful as yours, but anyways. But it's I think that there is some level of stubbornness of we're never going to get into this. It's going to be painful, but we still getting into it, right?
Oh yeah, I think you have to be a little crazy. I think you have to be a little crazy to be a first-time entrepreneur. I think you have to
Right.
be a lot crazy to be a second or third time or fourth time entrepreneur.
Right. You went through. You survived.
You know what you're signing up for. You know
Right.
you're what you're about to go through, and you do it anyway. I think that's crazy. I really think that's crazy. I think I'm a little crazy.
Yes. I feel the same way. Yes, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And congratulations on winning the Startup Battlefield last TechCrunch 2024.
We got an award. We didn't win the entire battlefield, but we did get an award. We were recognized, which was nice.
Right. You were the top 20, but then you got another award, right?
We got a Spirit of Disrupt award, which was nice. That was a
Right.
personal call out for me, which I feel honored by. But yeah, look, when we went there, we were mainly focusing on seeing what else is out there, connecting with other entrepreneurs. We'll get into our product, I'm sure, with what GroupUps is doing, but it's not like our audience is there. But I think it's super important to be connected in with others that are building and showcasing what you do on a stage, especially one as big as TechCrunch, is important. It's helpful, is great brand building. So there are huge benefits that come with that. But you don't go there to necessarily win the award. I think you go there to be around really incredible people that are also doing things that are incredibly difficult, but are being pursued by ambitious people. And you hope that through osmosis, you can become better and more like those people, and maybe you can be a part of them becoming better too.
Yes, I agree. So let's get into a little bit about your latest startup, where you that's how I met you, through GroupUps. What does GroupUps do for people that don't know you guys?
Yeah, so GroupUps, what we did was we created a platform, an experience for people that are buying really complicated things where nobody is an expert essentially on what this piece of equipment that you might be buying. Nobody's an expert on that. So in dentistry, which is our launch market, for example, these big X-ray machines that take 3D images of the skull, of the face, of the mouth. Who's an expert in buying this thing? Nobody.
Right.
No, even a dentist. The dentist doesn't know how to buy it, what these things should cost, what brand is appropriate for them. They're overwhelmed. buying big equipment in general is overwhelming, even for somebody who is a procurement specialist, a buying specialist. Because guess what? You're not buying this thing every day. It's not like you're very familiar with this thing. So what we did was we took a look into a few industries, including dentistry, and we learned that not only is the process overwhelming, but the pricing is all over the place. There is no pricing transparency. Think of these things as, call for pricing type stuff, where the MSRP doesn't matter. Nobody actually pays the MSRP. And behind that is, what are people actually paying? Okay, well, you don't know. And the way that we solve it is we do 95% of the work that the salespeople who are experts at selling the equipment, who you have to buy from, what we've done is we do 95% of their work with AI. And in 5 minutes, we know exactly the type of equipment that somebody should be buying in an unbiased, brand neutral way. And because we're doing this so often on behalf of individually owned businesses that are very hard to sell to, so your customer acquisition cost is high, what we do is we've done all of their work and we drop this hot lead into the lap of a salesperson and say, here you go. All your work is done. Voila. Give us a good price. And they're happy with it. So they give us a better price.
Right.
We do their work, and the buyer is happy. The seller is happy. It's a symbiotic relationship.
Right. Right. Part of the challenge, as you mentioned, is the complexity of the equipment, and then that your buyer is a non-technical person. So if you talk technical, then you're screwed, right? But also they need to understand some of the intricacies of the equipment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we try to make it relatable. I mean, look, we don't know. You might not know an X-ray machine, even if you're a doctor or a dentist. But what you do know is cars. You see cars every day. You probably go to work in a car. Okay, so let's step away from X-rays. What kind of car are you buying? Are you looking
Right.
for a BMW or are you looking for a Toyota? Because they're different. You might not know all the intricacies and all the differences, but that gives us a good starting point. Because if you're not shopping for a BMW motorcycle because you have a family and you need you need car seats, well, a motorcycle doesn't match what you need. It's not suitable. You wouldn't know that if it weren't cars. Imagine you'd never seen cars before, you've never bought one before. So we make it really easy and relatable and easy to understand for this complex stuff. We make it
Right.
accessible so that they can understand it a bit better. We say, aha, you're asking for a Toyota sedan. You're not asking for a luxury vehicle. You're not asking for a motorcycle. You want something reliable. Great. Here are the options. By the way, this is the best pricing that you're going to get on this. Here's who to buy it from.
Yeah. The way that I try because I'm on both sides, right? I'm a software engineer and I'm an entrepreneur. So sometimes I have to talk about the business to non-technical people, technical stuff to non-technical people. So talking about black boxes, I know how it works, but they don't care. They don't have the attention to get into that. So what they want to know is, what does that box do, right?
Yeah, they
And
want to know the value that they're getting.
yes,
They're
yes,
not as excited about what backend looks like or what code base you use. They don't care about that. What does this do for me? What value do I get? For us, it's pretty simple. It's you get better price and it's brand neutral. It's a better experience. You don't have to talk to salespeople. For you, it's look, it works. It accomplishes what you want it to accomplish. You don't care that I wrote it in XYZ language. This is the value that you get. Yeah, I think it's very similar with what we do.
yes, yes. I agree. And why are you focusing on dental equipment? Are you planning to go to other type of verticals in the future?
Yeah, we'll go to other verticals, but the story with dentistry is actually a pretty fun one for me to tell. So before we launched GroupUps, the original version of this company was called the Convoy. And the idea
Right.
was get small businesses that are independently owned discounts on services and on software, because we would be grouping together their buying power and giving access through a lower customer acquisition cost to the sellers to access our audience. We had a decent go-to market strategy, but it wasn't going to work. It was a horizontal platform, horizontal approach to marketing. We said, okay, if this isn't going to work, but we know that the thesis, the problem is still the problem to solve. We have to solve it a different way. And as I'm going back and forth with maybe what industry to verticalize into or what pivot we need to make on the product, I go in for a root canal. So I had just moved to North Carolina from New York, and I go in for a root canal, and the dentist knows me or knows of me because he used my last app. And he said, Yasin, what are you doing now? I saw you sold your company. My friends all used your app. He said, first of all, that's pretty cool. I'm like this tiny, tiny celebrity in a really small niche industry that it's kind of weird if somebody knows who I am. That's like a 1 in a million occurrence for me. It happened to be my dentist. And I said, well, here's what we're doing. We're getting discounts for small businesses on services, on technology, on software, things like that. Including for offices like yours. What do you need? And he's like, oh my God, I need this. You have no idea. He walks me over to his x-ray machine. That example I was giving earlier about the big x-ray machine that goes around your head. He walks me over
Yes.
to his x-ray machine and he goes, Yasin, it took me 3 months to negotiate this thing down. I got it down $12,000. But here's the thing. I don't have 3 months. I'm running 2 offices. I'm a business owner. And the other thing is, I don't know if the 12,000 is real. I have no idea what it really should cost. I have no idea. Nobody knows. So maybe I got 3,000 off. Maybe maybe the 12,000 is real. I doubt it, but I supposedly got $12,000 off. I said, oh, that's very interesting. So there's no pricing transparency. I'm an arbitrage person. I have a finance background, so I'm thinking, where are the imperfections here? And I say, okay, let's get my root canal finished, but I'm going to go to a trade show. So I go to a trade show in Miami and I start talking to the salespeople I get friendly with them. And they start talking about, oh yeah, they sell the same stuff to veterinarians, but for less money. I said, oh wow, haha, cool. Why? Well, dentists make more money. And then I find out that they call it the dental tax because dentists don't know any better. I said, aha,
Oh,
imperfection, arbitrage opportunity. These are buyers that are fragmented from each other. There's no pricing transparency because of that, and they have no leverage. They have no buying power as a group. So I went back to that dentist. He ended up becoming my first dental investor, my own dentist. And he said, Yasin, I think if you do this for dental, this can get really big. I said, I agree. This is a massive market to start in, but it also opens up the door, to answer your other question, into medical equipment more broadly. Because a lot of the same players, a lot of the same manufacturers, a lot of the same distributors that are in dental are in medical. So we used it as a wedge to get into medical equipment. But the reality is, we're not building a vertical specific platform. We are in a specific vertical. But the tech that we're building, the approach that we're building, the process that we're building, it's applicable to really anything where there are large dollar amounts being spent on pieces of equipment that not everybody is an expert in and really can't become an expert in.
right, right. And they don't have the visibility or the bandwidth to become an expert in whether the how the machine works, the specifics and the technical specifications, but also the value on the market.
That's right. With AI, you don't need to be in the dark anymore. You do need to know how to use the AI to get to the
Right.
right types of products, but you also don't know, you don't have pricing transparency. So we have a database of all these prices from across the country that all of these independently owned buyers are sending us. I know what the prices are across the board. Nobody else
Right.
has this. So we're using that as intelligence for the benefit of the buyer.
I see. Very interesting. It's the way that I see, going back to what we're talking about, building startups. As an entrepreneur, we have to have this balance of stubbornness and sensitivity, right? On one hand, it's stubbornness because, sometimes the world is saying, that's not going to work, but you have to be stubborn enough to punch through that, right? But then sensitive enough to see how, what are the problems, what are the, what people tell you, because that's where you get the feedback on where things are going to work, right? Um, so it's a selective stubbornness, selective sensitivity, I guess, right? It's very tricky, very difficult to do it right.
I think, look, I'm not saying I've always done it right. In fact, I've certainly done it wrong in some instances. I think the trick is, if there is a trick, at least what has worked for me is just being honest with yourself. If you're constantly saying, are we doing this right? Are we testing this like scientists and being non-emotional about if this is working or not? I think that helps because in our case, that first iteration of our product wasn't working. And it's not because the product was bad. It's because the market, or at least our way of getting to that market, wasn't working. Okay, so we need to adjust. We need to pivot. My thing has always been be a cockroach, be hard to kill. Well, the easiest way to die is to let yourself get in the way of succeeding, of living, by being stubborn in the wrong way, like you mentioned, but being, as you called it, sensitive enough to say, yeah, this isn't working out. Let me be honest with myself and say it's not working and make the adjustments that are needed. It's really hard to do when you've taken money from family, friends, investors, people that you know and you care about. It's hard to
Right.
say, hey, I got this wrong. But when you're honest to yourself, you can be honest with them and they get it and they're okay with it. And it allows you to actually preserve their money and preserve your own company and cockroach down, as I call it, just be hard to kill.
I love that phrase. I'm going to start using it.
Make startup cockroaches across the world.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, there are unicorns out there, right? Startup unicorns out there, which is great. If the market opportunity that you got in, it's gets you there, that's great. But I I think that it's much higher probable and much more likely to get to grow towards what the market is responding, right? And then you can see how big that opportunity is going to be, right? And do your best to try to get there, right? Um, try to find what is the most efficient way to grow, rather than trying to aim to a unicorn, and overbuilding, overgrowing, to then eventually failing if it's not a unicorn, right?
Yeah. And by the way, I've adopted the wrong mentality thing in prior lives. Even in this company, I've adopted the wrong mentality. And this is not
Right.
my first company. It's not my second company. And I still adopted the wrong mentality. It's hard to adopt that mentality all the time. But if you keep coming
Right.
back to center and you're honest with yourself, like we talked about, and you identify what's not working openly and honestly, and you're not too precious over being correct, you can get to the right solution. You can get to the right place that you need to be. But the path to unicorn, I think, is really it doesn't start at the finish line. I think a lot of people build, to your point, as if they're a unicorn already or with a unicorn mentality. But imagine getting ready for a marathon and all you did was train for the last mile. What about the first
Right.
27 miles or however long a marathon? I've never run one. I never will. But what if all you did was train the last mile? You're not going to survive the marathon. You have to prepare for that
Right.
last mile, be open to it. But I think a lot of people take that unicorn mentality the wrong way. You can't
Right.
get to mile 26 without getting through miles 1 and 4 and 10 first.
It's that phrase of a 10,000 miles trip starts with one step, right? And then
Yeah,
another
yeah.
one, and then another one, right? Yeah. I prefer to drive to the US rather than fly, right? It takes longer, it's more expensive, right? uh it's a less efficient way to go, right? um it's a 36-hour driving, to get to the Bay Area, for instance, from
I was
Guadalajara.
just looking up how long it takes to get from Guadalajara to the US. So 36 hours to the Bay.
Yeah, it's
That's a long
2,000
one.
miles. Yes, yes. But it's for on one side is to do something extraordinary, right? That's one part of the thing. The other one is, to challenge myself to do something difficult, right? But it's also, and in that process is like, basically you start driving. Okay, how can I do the next hour? And then how can I do the next hour, right? Um, it's if you think about the whole trip, then yeah, it sounds impossible, right? And it's what you're talking about, right? um I've done it like 10 times already, and I enjoy it very, very much. um because I get into this zen, it's me, myself, the road, right? um it's a great place, to just go through ideas, right? Yeah,
Sounds
yeah,
fun.
yeah.
Sounds like it could be fun.
It Yes, it is fun. It is, yes.
I imagine like startups, it's probably not always fun. Not every part of it, at least.
Yeah, and you have to go through different risky situations. You could run out of fuel. The truck could break. There's so many things that could go wrong. So yeah, it's like a startup in a way, right? That you know, if you do all those things right, if you prepare for all those things right, then you're going to go through it successfully, right? Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your other startups. Tell me a little bit about how you founded Fantasy Life.
Yeah, so Fantasy Life Story actually starts with my first company, which was right after I left
Right,
Morgan Stanley. I started this company called Paired Media, and we did well. We did 500,000 in sales, just me and my business partner, over 18 months. It was a brand new product. It was in the physical world. I can get into what we did, but it's not too important to
right,
this story. The end of it was that we were onto something, but it wasn't going to scale without capital. We
right,
weren't going to get the capital. We hadn't proven the business enough to warrant any sort of injection of capital. The type of business we were building, it was honestly more like a private equity backed business where you would have more uh, cash, potentially more cash flow, but it needed a larger injection of capital. And we had created a new market for the thing that we had produced. But at the end of the day, with me bankrolling it and it just being me and my business partner, it wasn't going to scale to where we needed it to go. So we
right,
unceremoniously shut it down. And but we had turned some heads, especially some impressive people in New York. Gary Vee and his brother AJ Vaynerchuk, they had noticed what we had done, and they said, "We really like what you did. More so, we like you and your team. We think you guys have done an incredible job. We want to
mhm,
introduce you to an opportunity. There's this celebrity. I don't know if you like sports." And I'm like, "Yeah, I like sports." They said, "Okay, well, there's this guy. He's the biggest name in fantasy sports, Matthew Berry. He's at ESPN. He's looking for somebody like you to start something with." And I said, "Okay, let's chat." So we talked. Turns out he was building a community of some sort. This is back when social media wasn't as um, I guess, robust as it is now. There was still some green pastures available to innovate in. And I said, okay, this is neat. This is a good starting point. And I sat back and I learned about just social in general. And it wasn't really until, honestly, it's where I cut my teeth when it comes to tech, building tech, how to build tech, how to recruit for tech,
right,
what types of metrics are important in consumer facing tech. And this was a mobile app. And it was the first time I was working with any sort of influencer of any kind. And the money that we had raised was from a lot of other influencers who were big in sports, and this was a sports tech company. But we took this little social community and we realized we had a lot of levers that we could use to generate top of funnel acquisition of users. Now, every business, in my opinion, has three categories of three activities that fall into one of three categories: ARM. I call it arm of the company. A is to acquire customers, and we had a good engine to at least acquire early customers, early adopters. And I said, great, that's a perfect testing ground. But it doesn't stop there. You can't just acquire them. What if you're throwing a party and you invite everybody to your party and you acquire them nicely, but your party sucks? You're not going to retain them. They're not going to stay with you. They're going to leave. They'll never come back. So, okay, we have A figured out. We have acquire figured out. Now, if we can figure out how to retain them, now people will stay with us. And we can't retain them unless we acquire them. So it goes in that order: A, acquire, R, retain. Now we have a way to, we have a proving ground, a sandbox to play in to learn how to retain these users. And we realize that, again, this comes back to me being an arbitrage person. we realized that something of significant value to this specific audience was information, and it was speed of information. In fantasy sports, this started off as a fantasy sports platform community. There's a big advantage to knowing things before others know things. And the way
Oh, I
that
see.
we launched what was essentially our big feature that made the company is a fascinating story. We had the fastest breaking news alerts in the industry, and it was a game changer. It made a huge difference for people. The way that
Oh.
that started was I remember exactly what I was wearing, remember exactly where I was, and I remember what the next 16 weeks of my life looked like. I was wearing these blue shorts, football shorts from my high school, casually on a couch in my living room in Jersey City, New Jersey, right across the river from New York City. My wife is in the next room, has no idea the Pandora's box I'm about to open. I look down at my phone and I see somebody sends out an alert, a breaking news alert, another app. And I said, I know we can do that faster. And I'm looking at my data. I'm obsessed with the data. I'm a data person, analytics, arbitrage, data is everything. I'm looking at the numbers and I'm saying there's got to be a way to create a more engaging platform. Because I'm thinking I'm thinking retention. How do I retain these users? We're getting them in. How do we keep them? And we have a good product. People are engaging with each other, but I needed something, a topic for them to talk about in a more substantial way to increase a metric that was important to us, which is time spent in app. How do we do that? Well, I said we can do the alerts faster. Now, before I tell you how we did these alerts, the way that I build technology, because I'm not a developer. I'm not like you. I don't build things. Oh, I build things. I just don't build them the same way that you do. The way that I build is I validate whether an idea should be built or not. And my goal is always to build something that is so successful manually that I have no choice but to build the tech because I validated the business case for it, the use case for it. Well, this next thing that I did all of that at the drop of a dime. I
Oh.
said, I can take a look at data that's out there and immediately surface it to my users, knowing that there was high intent of taking action on this info. Let me try it. Now, we don't have a front end anything. There's no like admin console. I'm logging into our server and I'm about to send a push notification to, I think at the time we had maybe 50,000 downloads that were still on the devices. I'm sweating. I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to copy and paste this. I'm going to give proper attribution to the reporter. I don't even remember what our first news alert was, but what I do know is that I think the reporter that broke the news didn't have a lot of followers on Twitter. He broke the news on Twitter. And we took that reporter who had maybe like a few thousand followers and blasted his message out to tens of thousands immediately as it happened. Nobody else knew it was happening. Nobody else has alerts turned on for this person, but I knew that this was significant for my audience. Immediately, I'm watching the numbers rise in my analytics dashboard. Everybody's jumping in. People are like, where do I talk about this? Our product wasn't even ready for people to talk about that notification. It just went to the top of our news feed. No reference to the notification. In fact, if you clicked on the notification, you lost it because now you're in the app. The notification didn't even go anywhere. MVP, right? Okay, but I proved that
Right.
people are willing to jump in. Aha. That dictated the next 16 weeks of my life and my developer team's lives. We immediately needed to fix the experience for when we send out the next thing, but it also meant that I couldn't stop what I was doing. I overnight, out of nowhere, signed up for 16 weeks of me monitoring my phone and my laptop live from 6 a.m. until 2 a.m. for
Wow.
16 weeks. Nobody really knows this. They thought it was all technology that first season, and it wasn't. I would take my phone and I would put it into a Ziploc bag and I would put it on my shower caddy when I took a shower. I showered once a week for those 16 weeks. But you could actually play with your phone if it's in a Ziploc bag. And as I'm monitoring, hoping that nothing happens while I'm in the shower, if something broke, if news broke, I would have to log into my server from my phone and immediately send out this notification. It was a very manual process. I did not need glasses before that season. My wrists didn't do these things where they crack before that season. I gave up my body for that season. But the thing is, that one action and the subsequent 16 weeks of our lives made the company. We finally went from acquiring to retaining, and our
Right.
numbers, our app metrics, were in the top, I believe it was top 0.1% of app metrics in the App Store because of that.
Wow.
Yeah, it was
Right.
phenomenal. It changed the business around. And then that informed and I didn't tell you what M is yet. So acquire, retain. Finally, you have the right to monetize. And it allowed us to pivot some focus to monetization efforts. But that made the company. That one random decision that nobody prepared for, that we made on a whim. And it made the entire company up until we exited. That was the feature. It made the entire company, honestly. Eventually, we automated it. That was not sustainable to do the way I did it the first season. We built tech around it to make it much simpler. But that was the story of how that phenomenal feature came to be. It was the literal body sacrifice of me and my team to get that thing out there that first season.
The way that I describe that usually is, sheer commitment, right? You have to be crazy enough to get in 150% to do whatever it takes to, get the application and the startup successful. So
I
yeah.
did tell you I was crazy.
Yes. Very interesting. Yeah. I used to, as a software engineer, used to get too focused on the how to build stuff, right? Oh, we can use this tool and this database and this, whatever it is, right? Um, and um, and I used to not think about what the people want. So it took me a while to get to the what's in it for me as a user, right?
Mhm.
Kind of idea. So uh, and I think that's what I struggle the most with, because as a software engineer, it's you're socially what is the word? You're socially crippled, right? In a way, right? You're more focused on the things than people. So it takes more more effort to actually interact with other people, right? That's what I'm trying to say, right? So I'm an introvert, so
Yeah.
it takes
It's not your initial mode of thinking.
right.
Your initial mode of
Right.
thinking is probably not about how are people receiving this. It's probably more tinkering and what can this thing do functionally.
Right. Right. So on my this was before my first startup. I was 15 years old, and I participated in a juniors achievements program called the company. Basically, they invited teenagers to build a startup, right? 30 people, they put them together. Basically, we built the first tech company on the program. So basically, everybody was selling, they had a hot dog stand or jelly, whatever, right? Small products. We built the first tech company. We built something similar to eBay back in 1999, right?
Wow.
You probably know about Mercado Libre. It's the eBay of Latin America, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we built something similar before, right before they launched it. So yeah, it was very, uh, you know, uh, extraordinary at that time. And I remember sitting there at Microsoft offices because they were the sponsors, so they put the place, the office. They shared their office for the that was the venue. And I remember sitting up there and thinking about, like, I'm an introvert. I have difficulty talking with people. So at that moment, I made the decision to break that. I am going to stop being introverted, right? Uh, kind of thinking it to myself, right? And they had 400 people. They chose 60, and then from those 60, they built two companies of 30, and then they we were chosen for incubator, right?
That's you did all, this is all at 15, 16 years old.
Yes, yes.
I don't. I don't know what I was doing at 15, 16, but it wasn't that.
So they wanted to buy the company for $70,000 back then, right?
Well, you're 15, 16, and they're going to buy your company for $60,000, $70,000.
Yeah, I mean, we had 60 shareholders. 30 were the kids that were building this, and then the other 30 were parents that bought the shares, right?
Yeah.
So the incubator basically wanted to hire the tech team, so I became the de facto CTO, right, of the tech team. We learned how to code, how to build the stuff, and we launch it, right?
How old were you when you became the CTO?
15 and a half, because
Oh, okay. So you were more experienced by then. You were 15
of
and a
course.
half. Okay, got it.
And from those 400 people, then basically they hired me at Microsoft, right? When I went to the interviews, I asked, oh, hey, where are the other candidates? There were no other candidates around me, So basically, they built up a position just for me. I didn't know that at that time, right?
That's very
I learned
cool.
that eventually. So that was fun, yeah. And I learned a lot, going through that, right? Yeah. So I went from startup to enterprise, in a year.
Man, I'm trying to remember what I was doing at 15, 16. I was probably just focused on like how to not be awkward or something, or I don't know, but
Right.
good on you, man.
It's
That's a cool experience.
it was a great experience. Yeah. So very interesting. I didn't know about the ARM framework. I don't know if it's called framework.
I have no
Acquire,
idea.
retain,
This is
monetization.
not this is something I made up. This is something I've always used in my life. But I do use it. I use it when I mentor, when I talk to other companies, when I
Right.
advise companies that I've invested in, like my own companies. I do use I suppose it is a framework. I don't know. I'm sure other people use similar frameworks, but I don't want to. It's not like ARM is something you're going to be able to Google and find a lot of results on. This is just what I used.
Right. Right. Well, I learned that I've been doing stuff without knowing what I was doing. What the name of what I was doing. And then eventually I was like, oh, I'm doing CTO type of activities. I am doing, oh, I'm an entrepreneur, because somebody, made me realize, like what you are doing is building companies. So then you're an entrepreneur. And I was like, okay, yeah, it makes sense, right? So you just invented a framework. Congratulations.
Thank you. Well, it's an old framework. I've been using it for like 10 years. So maybe I should have put it out there somewhere back then. I'm actually going to see if there's a known framework that accomplishes the same thing.
Right. It's not only new, it's proven.
But at least anecdotally and at a micro level with my companies, it has helped my own thinking.
So I wanted to ask you a little bit about exiting startups. I haven't experienced that myself yet. Um, when, how do you know when is the right time to exit a startup?
Man, I don't know. Anybody that tells you they know the answer to that probably doesn't know either.
Right.
Who knows? Look, I think the right thing to do is you especially if you have investors, you have a fiduciary and, in my opinion, a personal responsibility to do what's right by them. And to do what's right by them, you need to listen to what's out there to be able to do what's right for their money alongside what they
Right.
invested in, right? So they know there's inherent risk involved. So we're going to do some things that are not proven yet, that are maybe unconventional. That's all part of the game, and some of it can lead to their investment becoming zero. But you have a responsibility to them to do what you can for them to earn something off of the money that they invested. And the
Right.
best way to do that is to build a revenue generating company that can be so profitable that you IPO and everybody's happy, everybody buys an island, right? That's and hopefully donates the majority of their money, but that's their personal decision at that point. That's what I would hope to do. But I think you need to listen to these offers, at least if they are coming in. I think
Right.
most offers coming in are probably a waste of time in general. But if you haven't sold a company, at least for me, it was helpful to understand the process and what that actually looks like. Because just like raising capital, you don't really know what a qualified conversation is. So you learn by doing. You might talk with an investor and you think, oh, they're definitely interested. They asked for my deck, or they said, let's talk again in 2 months. And you get caught up on that. Getting acquired, I think, is the same thing. And it's not like I've been part of 20 acquisitions or something. It's been like one and a half. I sold my company, and I was on the founding team of another company that sold, but I wasn't part of the other company, the event technology company. I wasn't there at the negotiating table. So that one, you know, I don't know how that deal was exactly structured. So my experience is being on the selling of my one company, but I also did for that first tech company that I talked to you about, the paired media. I also structured a deal to be acquired. And here's how that one worked. There was a person who ran an agency in my industry, not a marketing agency. They were an agency to manage spend in the vertical that we were building in. He invited me to his office because he really liked what we had built. He said, "This is really cool. I think we could build a big business out of this." And I said, "Aha, so do I." He said, "Why don't we chat?" I said, "Look, I'm looking to raise capital so that I can build this thing up and out. I think this can get really big." He said, "I have a different idea. Why don't we roll you up, have you be CEO, and buy a bunch of different companies, but it'll all be under your umbrella?" That deal, after that idea was presented to me, that idea was presented at the end of the workday, his workday, 5 p.m. I stayed in his office until 2 a.m. and we just
Wow.
structured the deal. We just sat there one on one. Now this isn't a publicly traded company. He was the main decision maker at his company. It was a sizable company, but we sat down one on one. We got to know each other. We ate dinner, which was great at the time because that was my first company and I was broke. So he bought, which was nice. And we stayed up until 2 a.m. in his office in the middle of Manhattan, structuring what this deal would look like, who else we would look to acquire, what our valuation was or wasn't, and what our expectations could and should be, what the commitment post acquisition would be. And I thought, wow, I had structured a whole exit in an evening. And the truth was, yeah, we actually did structure like 85% of it. Now, I went back to my partner and I was like, look, I think this is an opportunity, but I think we can go bigger than what he's envisioning. And in my head, I had a dollar amount that I wanted to sell for, or I was going to see myself as a failure, which is a really immature way to think. By the way, I disagree with myself completely now. But we ended up walking away from the deal. But I thought I knew how to structure a deal now. I was like, okay, I've been through this once. What I didn't know, and I didn't learn until I sold my last company, was there's so much more that needed to be done. Now, again, it's true. We did like 85% of the deal, 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. We ironed it all out. But then there were lawyers, there were employment agreements that we needed to think through. There were, like, what does that non-compete look like? There was a lot of legal that we hadn't thought through yet. But conceptually, we had figured out what this thing could and should look like. So, I've been at that table a few times, including with suitors that wanted to buy the company that either we ended up walking away from or they walked away from the deal as well. And it wasn't going to make sense. And we ended up selling to what I think is an awesome company led by a really solid team with the company that I sold my last one to. But there were a lot of stuff that I hadn't done before that I had to learn about. What I do know is this, to your original question of when do you know how to sell your company? You don't know. At least from my experience. I've never scaled a company to, 100 plus people, and I've never sold a company for 9 digits. But they were sizable enough where I have some experience. My level, though, uh, is very specific to the level of exit that I've had. I imagine that this is
Right.
far different for people doing much bigger numbers or selling to publicly traded companies. We did have a bid come in from a publicly traded company. That was a different process. It was much lengthier, for example. So there's a ton that I don't know. But I will say, when it comes to answering the question of how do you know when to sell, I think the answer is you don't. You just kind of go with the flow, which you need to get really good at as an entrepreneur. You listen to what the market is saying, you are curious, and you want to find out more and learn more about your own market because you always come in almost like as an outsider. There's always more to learn. And having those conversations with potential buyers is a part of satiating that curiosity, learning more, being curious so that you constantly are gaining more knowledge. And I
Right.
think at some point it feels right. The numbers make sense. Both sides have to feel like this makes sense. The buyer's not going to buy unless they have full commitment that this makes sense for them and that the team is the right team to bring into their umbrella. Everything's got to match up, and I feel like that happens very rarely. But you should have the conversations in the meantime so you can learn more so that you're prepared when the opportunity is correct.
Adding to your question, to your answer, sorry, I think that if somebody approached you to try to buy the company, then you should explore that till the end rather than saying, oh, no, we're not selling right now, right? And then you can learn, whether it's going nowhere or somewhere, right? You can learn, get the experience, and then you can decide whether it is worth it or not to sell it,
Yeah.
to exit.
You're also going to come across reasons why they're going to walk away. Most of them are going to walk away.
Right.
We were in a position twice now at the start of this company to actually buy two different companies. One was a pure tech company, one was not a tech company. There's a dance. There's a dance, and we came close to wanting to pull the trigger on both of them, but we ended up walking away as well. And that's the majority case of buying and selling companies. I think, again, very specific to my experience, but
Right.
I think the majority of them nothing ends up happening, and then you need to be prepared to feel like you've just wasted a ton of time. So you do need to be very judicious about how much time and effort you're spending with that potential suitor, and along the way being very honest with yourself so that you don't get too overly ambitious that it's going to happen. You might
Right.
accidentally disincentivize and weaken your team by getting their hopes up on something. For example, I've had a friend tell me that he wishes he didn't tell his team when they were being potentially being acquired. Everything changed for him, including the work ethic of the company. Things changed, so these things end up
Oh.
being a waste of time most of the time, or on paper they end up being a waste of time. You might learn a lot in the process, but it's not guaranteed. So you can't let the company fall to the wayside. For example, you need to make sure that you have to assume and act as if it's not happening up until the money is in the bank.
Right. Right. Um, I see. I see. I see what you're saying. Yeah. Um, Sometimes when people talk about the value for a startup, I remember Austin Powers. When the bad guy says $1 million. Uh, so, you were talking about you had a number in your head. I always think about that. Entrepreneurs have this whatever number that is not connected to anything in reality, right?
Mm-hmm. That was me.
And yeah, until you go through the process and then you realize, okay, there's a more scientific way to evaluate the company, right?
Yeah. Yeah. My number in my head was 5 times higher than the number that was being offered. The
Right.
correct number was the number that we were being offered. I was wrong by 5x.
Right. Right. Yeah. It took me a while to realize that, and I say this with love, right? Nobody cares about our startups outside of us, right? So we put a lot of value in it, right? We put a lot of love and we value the company, but people that don't know us, they don't know us, right? So
Yeah.
you know, uh,
especially with start. So like if you're, so I was listening to, you listen to the Acquired podcast at all?
I think I listened to one episode. Yes.
Okay, so anyway, they were recapping they had a special guest. I believe she was the COO or chief legal officer at Zillow. I draw a lot of comparisons between my company and Zillow actually for a number of reasons, but
Right.
between Zillow and Trulia, their business models were far more mature than most early stage startups. I mean, both of them were poised. One was a public company. I can't remember if Trulia was a public company or not at the time, but they had numbers that they could actually go on. So then it became a lot of the song and dance was the numbers side was already taken care of. So it didn't matter it didn't matter if they did love or didn't love their company any longer. They had a value on the company for early stage
Right.
for a very early stage before there's repeatability in business model, and it's not like an acqui-hire or it might be an acqui-hire. It's there's much less math involved. There is
Right.
math involved, but it's not. I think that's when people really don't care about your startup, and the view of the founder versus the view of the acquirer there could be a big mismatch. And I witnessed that in my example when we were on the selling side with that that first company that I tried to sell, but also on the buying side. In both instances, one more than the other, the value that the entrepreneur put on her business was much higher than what the math shook out to be. But she didn't care as much about the math. I did as the buyer, but I didn't care about her startup in the way that she did. Wonderful company. I would have loved to have bought it just for probably half of what she wanted us to buy it for.
Right. Right. Yeah, and that's what I usually talk with my people about that. Nobody, loves our company as we that were involved, because we get involved into it. So we our perception is affected by that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's our identity in a lot of ways too. So it's almost like putting a value on your identity.
Oh, it's so difficult to get detached of, yeah, you know you and your company, are your are the same, one and the same, or different. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have one last question before we wrap it up, because we're already over the time. um, I wanted to ask you about your experience at JP Morgan Chase. What was the most surprising lesson you learned as VP?
Can I give you the most surprising lesson I learned while I was at Morgan Stanley? Because they had
Sure.
just gone through.
Yes.
So Morgan Stanley and Smith Barney had like a somewhat forced marriage, where this was back in 2009 when the economy tanked and we had the financial crisis. Um,
Yes.
Morgan Stanley and Smith Barney were kind of like, I call it an arranged marriage by the government in some ways. I joined years after they had actually, I believe maybe a full year after they had actually merged, but I realized that companies that big merging together was a lot slower than I would have expected. And there was
Oh, really?
so much opportunity for me to come in as a 20 nothing year old and say, hey guys, this doesn't make sense to me. Why are we doing it this way? They're already doing this thing really well. You guys are doing this thing really well. There is a major redundancy. And with a little, I guess at the time, a little millennial thinking, we could probably get things to work a lot more smoothly than how we're doing it now. Why don't we run this exercise? And I kind of became an entrepreneur. I created my own business model that kind of looped together and interconnected these disparate things at Morgan Stanley
Oh,
to generate value for the company and for the teams that I was kind of connecting together. So I ended up accidentally doing the work of, I guess, like an integration specialist post merger.
right.
And it was a really good model. But the surprising thing to me was how, I guess, because they're such big companies and they have so much more going on than just immediately what's in front of them, that I think it's difficult for large companies post merger to really understand how to best integrate uh, disparate parts of companies of those two companies. So it's that was surprising to me, because to me it was so obvious that we should be doing X, Y, and Z. So much so that I just
Right.
did it, and then others followed and sued, and it made a lot more sense. And those different entities started working a lot more closely together.
Wow. I haven't thought about that. Yeah, they can be merged on paper, but not on people.
And process as well. And maybe it's because it
Right.
was a forced merge. I call it, again, I don't know if it was a forced merger, but I call it a forced merger. Um, the opportunities for easy integration were far greater than I thought they would be by the time that I joined. And maybe because of the sheer size of the companies, nobody really put two and two together. It took an outsider way of thinking to say, this
Oh.
doesn't make sense. And it might be because I was younger than everybody around me. Like I joked that I was 20 nothing years old. Everybody else, this is a more mature industry. They're not looking at it through the lens that I looked at it from or through.
Right.
So I just said, this doesn't make sense. And that mentality, by the way, has followed me throughout my entire entrepreneurial journey. I've never really innovated as an insider. I've always come in as an outsider and said, okay, I like being an outsider. What about this status quo doesn't make sense? I don't just accept the status quo. I say this just logically doesn't make sense. Okay, there's probably an opportunity here. Let's make that happen.
Very interesting. I haven't thought about that way.
Interesting to me at the time. I don't know if it's actually interesting. So maybe to some people, I guess, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I always, when I work in different big, big corporations, and whether as as an employee, as a vendor, as a different relationship, but I'm always amazed by how yeah, how inefficient they are, right, in on running things, right. Um, and there's this status quo that it's accepted, and it is how it is because historically it's how it's been, right. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think in another life, I would have loved to build a career as an innovation specialist at large organizations to usher
Right.
in needed change. Like right now, how to implement AI internally at these large companies, where the opportunities actually are. I feel like I could probably make more money just innovating those companies than if I had a unicorn exit myself, because there's so much value that they're just not going to get because they just don't know how to make it work at a big organization.
Oh, I see.
But we'll see. There is good innovation happening, good adoption of AI at these large organizations. I just think it's not really. It's elementary innovation. I don't think they're. I barely. I think they're barely scratching the surface of what they could be doing.
Yeah, they're using AI on a very surface level.
Yes.
Yes, I
Yeah.
agree. I agree.
It should look that way to the end user, in my opinion, for a good user experience. It should look like it's elementary level so that it's accessible, so that it's easy to use. But I think the inner workings of the company are just barely scratching the surface of how much AI can revolutionize what they're doing, how they're doing it, how much value they can provide to their customers and to society and to their shareholders. I just think there's a ton of value being a ton of unmet value.
So I think we should wrap it up. We're
Yeah.
going a little bit over our time. I appreciate, and I apologize for spending more time that going
No,
over
no, all
time.
good, man. This was fun. Thank you for having me.
Right, right. Yeah, I'm glad that we talked, and I'll send you some information about the Mexican market on the medical industry. So hopefully that helps you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll be in touch. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Federico.